As I said in my previous video, to my eyes, George Groves did not look good at that weigh-in today with Chris Eubank Jr. He didn't look good physically, and he didn't look good in terms of his body language to me. But that don't mean he's going to lose the fight. That don't mean that it will be any type of problem for him once he's rehydrated and all that kind of business. He might look far better physically, and his demeanor may be far more relaxed once he's rehydrated. So I'm not going to read too much into the weigh-in, but what I will say is this. If you go back, and I'll put a screenshot on screen so you can see what I'm talking about. If you go back to some of George Groves' earlier fights, the Carl Froch fights and some of the subsequent fights, George Groves appeared aesthetically to be in much better condition than he is now if you look at those weigh-ins. Now his body don't seem to be as defined, and maybe that's just age, but maybe it's a situation where George Groves is blowing up in weight in between fights, and so when fight time comes and he has to lose all the weight, he's not going to be as ripped, and he's going to have to lose more water because he's got so much, he's got more fat on him than he had back then. So he's retaining fat, but he's having to lose loads of water, because obviously it's easier to lose water than it is to lose fat, if this makes sense. So that might explain why George Groves has come in a pound under, nearly a pound under the super middleweight limit, but he don't look as ripped as he did in previous weigh-ins. I didn't see, or I can't remember what he looked like at the Jamie Cox weigh-in, but again, the screenshot on screen will show you how he looked a lot more ripped in previous weigh-ins. And these are weigh-ins at the same weight. It's understandable if a guy used to be a lower weight and he's moved up and he don't look as ripped at a higher weight. That's not the case with George Groves. The exact same weight he's been boxing at for his entire career, but yet now his body don't look as defined or as conditioned as it did a couple years ago. Why is that? And does that mean he's had to kill himself more to make weight this time because of the fact that he don't look ripped, but yet... Am I making sense here? I hope I'm making sense. Because you can make weight, you can drain water out of your body when you're not ripped. Do you understand? And lose loads of weight to get down to weight. If you're ripped, you're not going to have to lose as much water because there's no fat. You're not carrying the excess fat on your body. So you're not going to have to dehydrate yourself as much. Whereas if you're carrying a bit more fat, you're going to have to dehydrate yourself more to get down to that same weight. Yeah, hopefully that's clear. Is that what has happened to George Groves? And does that mean he's had to drain himself more for this fight than he normally would? Because, yes, the Jamie Cox fight was his last fight, and some people said he looked similar at the Jamie Cox weigh-in. But look at how big George Groves was when this fight was announced. George Groves had ballooned up in weight. Even the screenshots, the graphics where it's got the World Boxing Super Series Taylor the tape and it shows George Groves. Look at the state of George Groves' body. So he's been blowing up in weight, at least between the Cox fight and the Eubank fight. He's blown up in weight quite significantly, and I don't mean blown up just in terms of water weight, because Canelo blows up in water weight. He puts all the water back on and gains extra muscle in between fights where he's not having to kill himself. No, Groves has gained a lot of fat in between fights. And you can see that on the graphic for the Taylor the tape. And I'll do a separate video about Taylor the tape. So let me know what you think of this, people. Has what took place at the weigh-in changed my view about how the fight is going to go? No, it hasn't. I still see this as a very tough fight for both men. I'll be surprised if anybody wins it in easy and dominant fashion. I think it's going to be nip and tuck. I think it's going to be a tough fight for both men. I think Eubank Jr. is probably going to be behind going into the second half of the fight, behind on the scorecards. And he's going to have to claw it back in the second half. Either get a stoppage or win on points. If the fight does go to points, I wouldn't be surprised if it's controversial. And if it's a draw, there is the they have a fourth judge, and if the fourth judge still has it as a draw, this is my understanding of the World Boxing Super Series rule. If the fourth judge still can't split them and he's also has it a draw, then they have to box a final round, a 13th round. Incredibly. So I don't know whether all that will happen, but you know, those are safeguards to make sure that there's a definitive winner and it can progress on to the final. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's some type of controversial decision if it goes to points. So let me know what you think about all the points I've raised in this particular video. Let me know how you feel in the comment section below. It's happening, I'm out.